For decades, Sunday River has been one of Maine's most popular ski areas. The resort is one of the largest and most spread out on the East Coast, boasting an astounding 8 peaks across 870 acres. Yes, that's right, a ski mountain in Maine is larger than all but one mountain in Vermont, a state that's much better known for the sport. But is Sunday River really a top-tier mountain when compared against its northeast competition? In this video, we'll go through Sunday River's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. If you find this information helpful, please consider helping us out by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel so you don't miss any of our content. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to make them in the comments below. The first thing that stands out about Sunday River is just how wide it is. Given it spans 6 to 8 mountains in a row, depending on who you ask, first-time visitors might feel like the resort extends indefinitely, something that's really hard to say about any other East Coast ski resort. Sunday River's 135 trails face a variety of aspects, resulting in striking head-on vistas of faraway mountain pods. Sunday River's mountain peaks increase in terms of height from east to west, and while the summits of the eastern mountains aren't really anything special, the higher elevation western areas boast fantastic views of the surrounding western Maine wilderness. But Sunday River's impressive acreage is chiefly due to its width, not its height. While Sunday River may have a 2,300-foot vertical drop, a decent but not top-tier number for the Northeast, no individual peak at Sunday River rises further than 1,700 feet, making for a lack of truly long runs. In fact, if any of these individual peaks were their own resort, they probably wouldn't even register on the destination radar. That said, the resort still boasts a decent variety of trails, with runs for various abilities. Terrain off each peak has its own flavor, making for very few runs that feel similar to one another. Especially of note is the diversity of runs available off each lift, with trails rated from green to double black available off multiple peaks. While it may be bigger than some competitors, Sunday River is a very good choice for beginners. The primary North Peak pod is chock full of green terrain, with lots of mellow groomers for those learning, as well as a bunny hill zone served by several magic carpets. And it's not hard to progress to the rest of the mountain either. Most mountain pods include at least one green trail, and the few that don't have fairly easy blues. Speaking of blues, Sunday River boasts more intermediate trails than any other terrain type. Outside the immediate North Peak base vicinity, groomed blue cruisers permeate the entire resort. The best intermediate pods are arguably located on Barker Mountain and Upper North Peak, both of which host multiple blue runs, although guests won't go wrong really anywhere at the resort. Sunday River also boasts a decent terrain park setup, although it's geared more towards less experienced guests. Once progressing to advanced and expert terrain though, it becomes clear that Sunday River is more of a family-oriented mountain than a place for a serious challenge. The resort's Black Diamond runs are somewhat steep, but they're also on the easier side. Many of these runs are groomed, while some have ungroomed sections next to groomed ones, making for good environments to practice moguls. A handful of advanced level glade runs also exist, chiefly in lower mountain areas. That said, Sunday River does have a variety of difficult ungroomed trails with double black ratings, especially west of North Peak in the Aurora, Oz, and Jordan Bowl pods. The expert footprint chiefly comprises classic narrow New England mogul runs with common obstacles such as rocks and tree stumps, as well as steep glade trails with similar obstacles in addition to a bunch of trees. Some of the resort's expert runs receive regular grooming, making for some serious bombers. A notable one of these runs is White Heat, which sustains the longest expert pitch at the resort. However, the resort's double blacks aren't the hardest in the world, and other East Coast mountains have much more technical runs. Sunday River's double blacks are either really steep or fairly narrow, but they're not both. Sunday River sees commendable East Coast snowfall totals, but they're not quite as high as some northern Vermont and Maine competitors. There's often enough cover to fill in ungroomed terrain naturally, but thin cover with obstacles such as rocks and dirt are not out of the question. But ultimately, Sunday River remains resilient thanks to excellent snowmaking. The resort has received significant upgrades in recent years, and it now boasts near 100% snowmaking coverage across on-piste trails. This allows it to have some of the most reliable conditions of any East Coast resort, as well as one of the longest seasons in the region, sometimes opening as early as October. That said, there are a few exceptions, most notably the expert-oriented Oz area, that rarely open until later on in the season. Like at many other East Coast resorts, Sunday River features a mix of modern high-speed lifts and antiquated or slow chairs. The resort's main base boasts high-speed lift service up to the Key North Peak Zone, including from helper lifts. One of these out-of-base lifts is the resort's signature Chondola, a unique lift, the only one on the United States East Coast, with a mix of gondola cabins and regular chairs. The cabins provide welcome isolation from the elements, although with only one gondola cabin for every 4 or so chairs, the cabin ratio could be higher, especially on cold days. Another strong point is the Jordan Mountain Express, which provides quick access to some of the most striking terrain on the mountain. This lift is on track to become a state-of-the-art Bubble 8-pack for the upcoming 2022-23 season, and should provide a much-needed alternative to the Chondola on cold and windy days. However, the majority of lifts at Sunday River are slow. Some of these fixed-grip chairs only service minor trail pods, but others provide service across critical mountain areas and really need upgrades. When traveling from the main mountain to the popular Jordan Bowl, all 3 lift options are slow. The major Whitecap Zone, which hosts Sunday River's satellite base, is also behind the times. All 3 of its quads are fixed grip with long ride times. At least most of these slower lifts are quads, which helps with capacity. Speaking of capacity, Sunday River generally features strong crowd management. The resort typically sees fewer crowds than similarly sized Vermont mountains since it doesn't attract the same New York clientele, and it has key high-speed redundancies that help at the main base. That being said, the resort still does get crowded in certain areas, partially as a consequence of its lift design. The Barker Mountain Express is the only high-speed lift outside Jordan Bowl that serves upper mountain terrain, and it becomes a serious choke point during peak times. This lift is also prone to mechanical problems, which makes the problem worse. And finally, the main base lifts still see lengthy lines in the mornings, as guests disperse across the mountain. On cold days, the lift lines to sit in the Chondola's enclosed cabins are much longer than the queues to sit on the open chairs. Speaking of cold days, Sunday River can become especially frigid during the peak winter months. The resort has some on-mountain lodges to stop in for a break, although some upper mountain areas are a bit removed from the nearest facility. The biggest annoyance revolves around stopping in at the Jordan Bowl base. The lodge is a few hundred feet up from the lift, and it's impossible to reach from other mountain areas without riding all the way up the Jordan Mountain Express lift first, and then specifically taking the Lollapalooza Green Trail or Blind Ambition Glades, and making sure to cut out at the right place. In general, on-mountain food is somewhat pricey for what you get. Given the magnitude of its width, Sunday River isn't the easiest mountain to get around, but in certain regards, it's not as bad as one might expect. The difficult part involves progressing from east to west on the mountain, which involves up to 4 lifts when going all the way from the Whitecap base to the top of Jordan Bowl. However, going the other way around is much easier, and can be done with a single lift ride, although the trails for traversing across do become flat in certain sections. Trails and lifts are well marked, which helps with navigation. Sunday River is about 1 hour and 45 minutes from Portland and just over 3 hours from Boston with no traffic. The resort is also about 3.5 hours from Montreal, Canada. For those looking to make the trek from New York City, the drive is nearly 7 hours. There's no public transportation from major cities to Sunday River, but some third parties organize charter buses for day trips to the mountain. Sunday River offers a variety of slopeside hotel and condo accommodations across its base areas. The 2 on-site hotels, the Jordan Hotel and Grand Summit Hotel, are both quite upscale, with pools, hot tubs, and spas. Various slopeside condo options are available across various mountain pods. For those looking for more economical accommodations, a number of hotels and inns exist about 10 to 15 minutes from the resort. For those driving and not staying on site, the resort has 3 main parking lot areas at the Maine Southridge base, the Whitecap base, and a bit further up the mountain at Barker. So Sunday River's sheer size and terrain diversity make it a very strong regional choice. But the resort falls behind the best East Coast mountains due to outdated lifts in certain areas, relatively short trail pods, and less challenging expert terrain than competitors. Lift tickets are pricey, but they're not egregiously so. and guests can score significant discounts with in-advance purchases. The resort is probably worth visiting for families in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, but it's probably not worth the drive from New York, which has options that are comparable or better with 2 to 3 fewer hours of travel. Now let's go through how Sunday River stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Sunday River sees decent natural snowfall throughout a typical winter, but doesn't receive the same accumulation as the best East Coast mountains and gets a 5 for snow. Sunday River really stands out in its resiliency, with some of the best snowmaking and grooming on the East Coast, and gets a 7 in this category. Sunday River is very large for the Northeast, with 870 skiable acres and 1,750 acres from boundary to boundary, and gets a 5 for size. Sunday River's trails feel very unique from one another, but aren't the longest in the world, and the resort gets a 6 for terrain diversity. Sunday River boasts some pretty hard terrain, but it doesn't compare to really tough offerings at some competitors, and the resort gets a 5 for challenge. Lifts are a mix of impressive and frustrating, and the resort gets a 5 in this category. Lift lines aren't the worst on the East Coast, with helpful redundancies in some areas, but there are a few choke points, and the resort gets a 7 in this category. Sunday River's lodges get the job done, but a few could be better placed, and the resort gets a 5 for facilities. Sunday River has pretty good signage, but the mountain's really wide layout results in a naturally tough environment to get around, and the resort gets a 5 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Sunday River is somewhat flat as far as destinations in the Northeast go, but its sheer width creates for some pretty unique perspectives, earning the resort a 5 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 55, placing Sunday River 9th on the East Coast. Sunday River outscores popular Vermont resorts such as Okemo and Mount Snow, but it falls short of top-tier mountains such as Killington, Sugarbush, and Stowe due to its underwhelming expert terrain and slow lifts. The resort also scores a few points below its larger, more northern Sugarloaf sister mountain and earns the same score as nearby Saddleback, but places one rank below as a tiebreaker because its natural snow isn't quite as good. It's worth noting that this list will probably change over the coming weeks as we work to add other East Coast resorts such as Mad River Glen, Bolton Valley, and Smuggler's Notch to our rankings. For more information on Sunday River and more than 70 other North American ski resort destinations, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.